Hi, welcome to the Optimizing Your Brilliance podcast, where we get to the source of what makes people brilliant and explore how to eradicate the barriers that stop you from shining. By shining, I mean being at your absolute best in both work and life. You'll hear from business and thought leaders who bear all and share their insider secrets, along with my episodes focused on optimizing your performance, productivity, success, and well-being. My name is Estelle Reed, founder of Be, executive coach, speaker, and best-selling author of Inner Brilliance, Out to Shine, 10 Antidotes to Imposter Syndrome, Workaholism and Stress. So, if you're ready to take your work life to the next level, let's begin. So, welcome back everyone. If you're new here, I'm reading from my best-selling book, Inner Brilliance, Out to Shine, 10 Antidotes to Imposter Syndrome, Workaholism and Stress. I've got permission to read the majority of my book out. The bits that have been excluded are included in my free workbook, which you can access on the QR code if you're watching on YouTube here, or you can head over to my website, which is estellereed.com. So let's begin. Chapter 8, Develop Your Inner Captain. Quote, "If you have good thoughts, they will shine out of your face like sunbeams and you will always look lovely." Roald Dahl. One of the things I've noticed about the clients that don't fully transform themselves is that they fail to get to grips with their inner critic and thinking. It's our inner critic that makes us feel like an imposter, which can then cause us to overwork and get stressed. They also continue to fall foul of the thinking traps which keep them stuck, such as feeling like a victim, turning persecutor, or worrying, not recognizing that they are the captain of their thoughts and the custodian of their belief system. They continue to succumb to "I've got to work hard all the time" or "I'm not good enough" deliberations. In this chapter, I'm going to provide you with strategies that will shrink imposter syndrome thoughts and help you to develop a more positive, flexible mindset. You'll also be able to deal with the curveballs of work life. However, probably what's most important is that you use these strategies as part of your maintenance going forward, as they'll enhance your joy and deter the doldrums. You're going to learn how to become your own cheerleader as opposed to being Debbie Downer, a Saturday Night Live character who frequently adds bad news and negative feelings. You'll learn how to direct an alternative script in your head using your inner captain and the various supporting characters. You'll also discover some antidotes to the doldrums, which will help you add more joy to your work and life. So, to recap, your unconscious mind acts as your autopilot. Your autopilot received most of its programming between the ages of 0 and 7. These programs enable you to act without conscious thought. This is why we target havening in these early years, to change the automatic programs that are hindering us. Each program has its own associated language pattern. When I work with my clients, I intensively listen to their words so that I can get to the root cause in their childhood. You can make significant and magical shifts with havening. However, some things that are unconscious, that are so unconscious that it can be difficult to find the root cause. This is where the thinking strategies that follow can help. Your unconscious mind is processing everything you are consciously aware of right now. What's interesting is that your unconscious mind is always listening. It's processing the words you use both in your head and with other people, not to mention the words you write, read and hear, hence why you can feel drained having spent time with someone negative. We can at least take charge of our thoughts by embracing our inner captain and ensuring the messages and direction given by our captain positively program our ship towards our desired destination. For those of you that are just tuning in now, our ship is us. And we've used a sailing metaphor throughout the book. You can tune into all the different metaphors if you go back to the start of this book. I think it's in chapter 2 where I break down all the different metaphors. To a certain degree, you can also control what you see and hear too. Remember the production line in chapter 7? Well, I also like to think of our mind as a factory. We have inputs at one end, the raw materials, our thoughts and our language. A process in the middle, that's the machinery, our unconscious mind. Output at the other end, the product, which is our state, which triggers our behaviour, actions, and ultimately the results we're getting. So what follows next is a series of action steps, all of which can be found in the workbook that accompanies this book. If you head over to estellereed.com, you can download it there. Heading: The impact of negative thoughts and language. In a series of studies highlighted in the Psychology Today article, using negative language can have a negative biological consequence for us, which can ultimately result in shorter, less successful and joy-filled life. In one study, seeing a list of negative words for a few seconds will make an anxious and depressed person feel worse. If they continue to ruminate, they begin to damage the structures that regulate memory, feelings, and emotions. In another study, our brain responds to fearful thoughts, for example, about death, even when they're not real, as though they're occurring in the outside world. This triggers a response from our thalamus and our amygdala. Now, here's the kicker when it comes to reframing our thinking and using more positive language. We have a neural bias for negativity. This is a survival mechanism and harks back to the days when there were countless threats to our existence. To overcome this neural bias, Fredrickson and Lasada recommend that we express 5 positive thoughts for each expression of negativity. So, for example, if you were experiencing an imposter syndrome thought such as, I'm not good enough, so that would be the negative thought, or I don't belong here, or I'm a phony, or I'm a fraud, or I'm going to get found out. They're all imposter syndrome thoughts. You would counter that thought with 5 positive statements. So you might say something like, I'm entitled to be here. My skills, knowledge, and expertise are just as valid as anyone else's. You get the idea. Next, what follows is a series of actions. Heading: Your inner captain. The role of your inner captain is to keep your thoughts in check, to reframe negativity, to be objective and practical, to support you positively and compassionately, but also to be firm sometimes. Probably one of the most challenging times of my life was being diagnosed with cancer. Initially, my inner captain went AWOL for a few days. I had to roll out all my tools to get myself back on track. I'd feared cancer since I was a little girl and was haunted by memories of a little boy called Ben who had leukemia. We watched his suffering on the news for months. Then the poor little thing died. It was heartbreaking to watch and taught me that cancer meant death and suffering. When I realised this, guess what I did? I havened away the memories. They were unhelpful in this context. So in other words, I havened away the memories of me watching Ben on TV experiencing cancer. So I don't know if you're a Gen X, you would probably remember the footage as well. And it was accompanied by, I'm sure Michael Jackson wrote a song about him called Ben, but I might be completely wrong. But even though we are watching something that's, in other words, not real, as in we're not experiencing right in this room, we're experiencing something that we're watching on television, we can become vicariously traumatized, which is why they have certificates on films. So my dad used to be hilarious. He used to let us watch all the Freddy Krueger movies, Nightmare on Elm Street, all of that. We absolutely loved it. We used to go to Key Video in the West End of Morecambe. That was like the highlight of our weekend. But equally, and whilst we were okay watching those things, I have havened with a number of clients scenes from various movies, including E.T., Jaws. It's all the 80s movies, isn't it? Because it depends what becomes associated or what state of mind the child was in at the moment. So in other words, the moment that they were watching that movie. So take, for example, I remember one client, they were watching Jaws on a staircase, so looking through the banisters of a staircase. They should have been in bed, so that they were secretly watching it. And downstairs on the sofa, their parents were arguing, and this created some anxiety in the client. So it was became anxiety about parents arguing, because the ultimate fear was that they were going to break up. And then that anxiety became associated and attached to the movie Jaws and what was going on in the movie. So what then occurs, the brain's a really clever thing in that whenever any references to Jaws appeared, so you might see a movie poster or you might see it advertised on television, that then re-triggers those anxious feelings experienced as a result of parents arguing. So what you would do in that scenario is you would go back and you would haven both the Jaws movie and any associated scenes, but also the scene relating to parents arguing. And then that cures your trauma, or if it's a phobia. So back to reading. I went to get my moles checked out. The GP I saw can either be extremely helpful and knowledgeable or brusque and demeaning. It's potluck. I used to dread going to see her. She was so patronising. If I only ever go to this person, I only ever go to this person if I'm desperate and there's no other doctors available. I self-consciously disrobe and show them the offending moles. They laughed in a superior, all-knowing, "You're wasting my time" way, and told me I was simply getting old. They were just age spots. I tried to forget the experience, but then several months later, whilst I was running a course, I couldn't stop scratching my back. I asked my husband to look. He said he couldn't see anything, but I did have a funny-looking mole. I didn't want to risk the humiliation a second time, so I did what GPs have told me they hate haters doing when I've trained them, and that is I Googled it. I self-diagnosed. I downloaded a mole checking app called Skin Vision. You take a picture of your mole and the algorithm tells you whether it's high risk or not. It said that there is some similarity between your photo and the skin cancer images on our database. I dashed off to the gym in our garage. I didn't want my daughter to get wind of what was going on and needed a good cry. Immediately, my mind went into worst case scenario, to everything I'd scared myself with on the internet. I'd filled my head with horror stories such as, if it was a melanoma, the nasty kind, it could spread to other areas of the body and I could die from it. All I could think about was not being able to be there for my girl growing up and leaving the love of my life to cope with it all. I'd not even been formally diagnosed yet. I stump up the courage to go back to the doctors and I'm referred immediately to an amazing consultant. He manages my expectations by saying, 9 out of 10 moles are not cancerous. This was the one of the things that I kept repeating to myself. It grounded me. It reminded me of the facts. By this time, my inner captain had kicked in and I was being more disciplined with myself as to where I was allowing my thoughts to wander. So what follows next is a series of actions. Next heading, Blackpool Illuminations. Going to Blackpool Illuminations was one of the highlights of our year. We'd go on a double-decker bus, buy glow sticks, eat fish and chips, wear kiss me quick hats, and wait in anticipation for the first bulb to be switched on. Then, before we knew it, the whole promenade was lit up. I think of negative thoughts in a similar way. One thought leads to one light going off in our head. Then, before you know it, you're lost in a chain of negativity and you have a whole string of lights lit up in your head. This then results in the body and mind full of negative chemicals brewing inside, which can last for ages. The trick is being able to spot when the first light bulb goes on, then interrupting the pattern of thought so that you're not faced with Blackpool Illuminations. So these are the things that you can do to manage or prevent that switching on Blackpool Illuminations. Number 1, become a master of distraction. As referred to in previous chapters, use this technique for low-grade, insignificant but irritating thoughts. Examples of distraction could include watching a comedy, going for a mindful walk, where you use your senses, reading something positive or enthralling. Number 2, tell the thought to stop. Again, providing it's a low-grade stuff. I use Mrs. Whiplash voice, more about her later. And simply say, stop, to the thought. I've also been known to sing the chorus from Disney's Frozen, let it go, sorry about the singing, sequence performed by Indina Menzel. That got into my head as a result of watching Frozen, goodness knows how many times, for my daughter. Number 3, don't use distraction or suppress thoughts. If a thought needs to be processed, use the Inner Brilliance Outer Shine journal. More on this later, and work it out in your journal. So if you've got a recurring repeat thought, so something that just won't go away with distraction, that's often a clue that you've been triggered. So triggered to old stuff, historical stuff, painful stuff, stuff that actually needs to be havened. Now you've got a couple of options. You can process the thought and the feelings. So when we have feelings, often so this is why I say don't suppress the thought, because if we try and suppress the thought, I was having this discussion with an organisation the other day. I'm working with a team. The team has lots of negative thoughts at the moment, and we can either put a sticking plaster over them and pretend that they've not got those thoughts and feelings, or we can have what I refer to, apologies for the analogy, and have a lance in the boil session. We get all the crap out. We unpack the thoughts, the feelings, the team feels heard and acknowledged, and then we work out an action plan. Because pretending that the thoughts and the feelings aren't there doesn't make them go away. If people are genuinely feeling something, then they've got to be able to process them. And that often means being heard, working out what's real, what's not real, but then also turning those concerns or worries into a constructive action plan. Well, as part of your inner captain, we can do this for ourselves through using the journaling process. And I've just recently updated the journal. So it's a new journaling acronym. So even in the book, I will recommend that you do certain things, which I'm sure I will get onto and start reading out. But what I realised is that people need a process that they can carry around in their head, so that as a negative thought pops up, let's say you're in the shower and you're giving yourself a right old waft of negative thinking, you can use this journaling technique to process through the thought and the feeling so that you take it into a more constructive direction. And the more times you do this, you're building the thinking muscle so that your inner captain becomes really strong. And so you don't entertain that Blackpool Illuminations string of lights. You don't switch all those lights on. You nip negativity in the bud. Now, there are other things that you can do, which I'm going to come on to. One is, so as a result of your journaling I use a highlighter pen, and by the way, I journal on my iPad these days. I use a stylus, and that's because we don't journal to keep a record of those nasty thoughts. We journal to process. And what you can do with a stylus is you can highlight those limiting beliefs, those recurring triggers that you notice that you're repeatedly writing down. And that is where you become a belief detective. And also you can go back and do the havening work in the previous chapter. I think it's chapter 6. Failing all of that, you come to someone like me as part of the Shine coaching program, and I'll do it all for you. I'll figure it out. And I can, 9 times out of 10, I can just hear the language when I'm listening to someone, or when I'm reading the goals, I can spot the triggers, and it's dead easy then, and we just go back. So you can do that. And then the other thing you can do is you can use a technique such as EFT, which I'm going to be coming on to as part of this chapter. So the next thing on the list of things that you can use, I can't remember what number I'm up to now, but it's use EFT, so emotional freedom technique. So if I've had a crappy day and really can't seem to shift my thinking, I tap it out whilst I'm walking my dogs around in the deserted fields where I live. And I cover this in the next chapter. So it's coming up in chapter 9, and I'll explain how you use that. But it is really good just for flushing out and getting rid of those nasty thoughts. And it's more complicated than havening, but it can be just as effective. And, even my daughter, when she was tiny and would be going to school, and let's say she'd got a piano recital in front of 90 kids. And so anxiety might crop up. And so she'd be sat in the back of the car tapping away. So for those of you listening, not watching on YouTube, I'm tapping on certain points of my face whilst saying what it is that you're thinking and feeling. What that does is it just gets rid of the feeling magically. It's amazing. But as I say, that's coming up in the next chapter. If it's a recurring, persistent thought, chances are it's an old thought, i.e. something from your childhood. So go and find the source and haven it away. I can always tell when a client's issue has been dealt with because the language changes. The issue is no longer present in the words that they use. So once you get rid of those triggers and those memories associated with that trigger, here is the miracle in that. And what I will say, the small print is not for all clients, but for the majority of clients, the clue that it has been resolved is that they're not using the language anymore. So they're no longer saying, oh, I don't feel good enough, or, I don't deserve my place at the boardroom table, or any of that jazz. It just doesn't come to the top of mind, and that's because the trigger's gone. Right, next heading, what ifing and plan B. Even though the consultant had reassured me, I still had what if questions. What if questions can send us into a blind panic. They make us catastrophize. They trigger our stress response. Whenever I find myself what ifing, I get real, I get practical. I work out how I would cope in the event of the worst case scenario happening. What would my plan B be? Somehow this frees me from worry because I work out how I would handle the problem. Your calm inner captain takes charge. And then we've got another set of actions, which I'll skip over. Continuing the theme of being practical, I wanted to know what would happen next if the mole was cancerous. The consultant looked at me with trepidation and then slight annoyance that his 9 out of 10 speech hadn't pacified me. I reassured him that knowing more helped me to be level-headed and prepare myself mentally. He explained that the next step would be to have a minor operation to have it removed so that they could check to see what type of cancer it was. I was so relieved. I thought, I can handle that. I didn't want to know anything else at that stage. I stopped Googling. My next reassuring inner captain phrase, which kept me sane, was, "I'll cross that bridge when I get to it." So there's a series of actions again, which I will skip over. A letter arrived from the hospital and it was time to cross that bridge. I'd been told I would get a letter discharging me if things were okay. I'd been invited in for another appointment. Not good news then. My inner captain went AWOL, again for half an hour. I went into a blind panic, thinking worst case scenario. I rang my husband and then my mum, and I cried lots. It's good to release emotions, but more about that in the next chapter. Then the inner captain kicked in again, and I realised I needed to take charge of the situation. And that's because, folks, we're not good at dealing with uncertainty, are we? Uncertainty is what causes our anxiety. So, one of the things that we try to get rid of that uncertainty is get back in charge. And so it's thinking about the things that you are in charge of, the things that you can do that's within your power and control. We can't control other people, but it's thinking about what are the practical steps you can take that you are in charge of. So I realised that I didn't have all the facts. I was making assumptions. I rang the hospital, and I'll always be grateful to the kind receptionist who uttered these words to me. "Sorry, love, if you've been called back in, it means the mole is dodgy." She probably shouldn't have told me that, but I appreciated it so much. I had more facts. I could prepare myself mentally for the appointment. Fear of the unknown can be scary. When we're fearful, we can end up making all sorts of horror movies in our mind, playing out a script that hasn't even happened yet. Heading: useful or useless thoughts. How often do we consider whether our thoughts are useful or useless? One of my first gifts from my husband when we started dating was a book about worry. I was in shock. His nickname for me was My Little Worrit. Was I really that bad? Then he wafted Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. How to Turn Your Fear and Indecision into Confidence and Action by Susan Jeffers. Another hint. I read it and I said, am I really that negative? He looked at me anxiously, having been asked one of those questions that could end in trouble either way. He swallowed hard and said, yes, sometimes. Well, that was a revelation. I'm sat here chuckling. I am actually, in real life as well. I had no bridge. I wasn't particularly self-aware back then. I learnt to feel the fear and do it anyway. It revolutionised my life. I started to believe that anything was possible. So much so that I thought everyone else should read the book. I bought and distributed copies to my family and friends. Not everyone wanted to be helped. I had to learn to keep my newfound positivity to myself, or at least be less Rod, Jane and Freddie about it. So what follows next is a series of actions. I once went on a positive thinking course with a colleague from work. We were used to grunting our good mornings in the kitchen whilst we made our first coffee of the day. However, after that training, we would say in jest, "How are you today?" The response was always something over the top and cheesy like, "I'm positively marvellous." We laughed about it because we were very sceptical and thought it couldn't possibly make us feel better. But do you know what? It did. I'm really dying to give a shout out to the person. my lawyer friend who used to work at Smith Partnership. You know who you are. Usually when I got home, my husband asked me how my day was. I would take a deep intake of breath and then launch into telling him everything that was wrong with it. He would start to glaze over within about 30 seconds. He knew that I was going to moan about the same old things. Groundhog Day. But following this course and another great book, How to Be Brilliant, Change Your Ways in 90 Days by Michael Heppel, I trained myself to focus on what had gone well and to talk about that instead. It wasn't that I didn't mention the crappy stuff, but what changed is that I slowly developed my inner captain, used the resources that follow, which meant that the negative things were less prominent because I took charge. I no longer had to burden him with every single worried thought that entered my head. Heading: Down in the Doldrums. Being down in the doldrums came to refer specifically to sailing ships that were stuck and unable to progress. Today, it has come to mean a state of stagnation, lacking activity, feeling blue, or depressed. I can honestly say that I've only ever felt depressed as a fully fledged adult, having learnt these techniques once. It was following our last attempt at IVF. We agreed that if it failed a third time, having used up all our embryos, that we would stop. During our last attempt, I got the dreaded call. The embryo had died. For 6 weeks, I mourned the loss of the children we could have had. Then one day I woke up and realised that this was the best thing for us. It's amazing what work your unconscious mind can do whilst you're offline. I'd been positively processing these feelings, twisting the scenario this way and that. We were happy as we were. I got stuck on a mindless thought train of the next thing people do is have another baby, baby number 2, and everyone has 2 kids in our family. Not whether this was actually the right thing for us. We have the most beautiful soul between us, and I feel proud of her every day. That's you, Daisy Doodle May. We were made to be a 3. We call ourselves the 3 Musketeers. She is absolutely enough for us. We're very lucky to have her, our miracle child, my everything. Depression does serve a purpose, particularly when we are grieving or have suffered a loss. It's like an enforced shutdown, and I think it has a place. Equally, we can create our own depression by repeatedly reaccessing crappy memories and letting our negative inner critic take hold. If the memories are persistent and you can't shake them off, go and haven them. Alternatively, find a havening practitioner that can help. I can help. I've heard people say that because they're having an off day, they declare it the start of a depression. Once we label ourselves depressed, we own that badge. We're on the lookout for the signs and evidence of depression. We negatively prime our brains to look out for the thing we don't want because we get more of whatever we focus on. I call this yellow car syndrome. I once had a yellow car. I thought it was unique. Turns out it's not. As I drove it home from the garage, guess what else I noticed? All the other yellow cars on the road. Prime yourself to notice the happy moments instead, even if it's seconds to begin with. Negative states of mind are like a bad smell. They come and go. We can hold the duvet tight around us and continue to bask in the rotten ambience, or we can loosen our grip and wait for the negative state to disappear, or cheat and use EFT, which I'll share with you in the next chapter. And since I wrote this book, I can't remember the source of the study, but apparently feelings only last 90 seconds. So, from a biological perspective, there's a burst of that chemical concoction rushing around our system, and then it dissipates after 90 seconds. And do you know what keeps it going? Us, our thinking. So that is kind of scientific proof of that Groundhog Day. So in that moment, we get a choice, folks, don't we? Do we continue that negative feeling, or do we let our inner captain take charge and stop those negative thoughts? Action, we'll skip over those. In Johann Hari's book, Lost Connections, Uncovering the Real Causes of Depression and the Unexpected Solutions, he talks about the Hamilton scale, which is used for measuring depression. 0 is you're skipping along merrily, through to 51, which means you're considering crashing your vehicle into a tree. Johann, a journalist, New York Times bestselling author and TED talker, had been severely depressed and had taken antidepressants since he was a teenager, having to continually change his medication and ramp up the dosage. He was told his brain was imbalanced and had to set out to prove otherwise in his book. He discovered through research that depression and anxiety are not caused by a chemical imbalance in our brains. In fact, they are largely caused by key problems in the way we live today. In his book, he talks about antidepressants giving a 1.8 positive shift in the Hamilton scale. If someone is suicidal, this is where 1.8 points away from committing the act could save someone's life. However, improving your sleep patterns can give you a 6-point leap. More about sleep in chapter 10. So basically the summary is, folks, we can improve our state of mind by prioritizing our sleep, and we can make ourselves 6 points happier by prioritizing sleep, getting a good night's sleep, versus, a 1.8 shift by taking medication. So absolutely, I am an advocate of taking medication. If you are, if you're depressed, you need to take what you need to take. And equally, there's so much stuff that we can do in addition to that to support our mental health and our well-being, which is what this book is about in essence. Heading your inner captain's voice. Before I begin, please don't confuse what I'm about to say with psychotic disorders such as schizophrenia, where the patient hears vocal hallucinations. I'm referring to the mental health conversations, the inner dialogue we have with ourselves. For example, have you ever read an email or a message in a grumpy, huffy voice tone and then misinterpreted what was said? Those messages from certain people, the messages you dread, the communications that you convince yourself will be negative. Reading the words in your grumpy voice and then chuntering about it in your head will only intensify any negative feelings. We're also at risk of distorting the meaning of the communication. Like when your partner buys you flowers and you assume they've done something wrong. Then we share our misery with other people and complain about what has been sent to us. As proof, we read it out to them, but this time using our best reading voice, a bit like I'm trying to do on this podcast. Damn and blast, it changes the meaning. So the other person looks at us like, what are you talking about? You swiftly put your phone back in your pocket. So in other words, reading it in a different tonality changes the meaning. Years ago, when I first started B, I used to do phobia cures. I can remember resolving a spider phobia by pretending that the tarantula had a voice, which sounded like Minnie Mouse, high-pitched and non-threatening. Changing the tone of your voice changes the meaning. Think about it for a minute. How did you know you were in trouble growing up? I know my mum used to use a certain tone and somehow extend the length of my name like this, Estelle. Sorry, Mum. The same applies to the voice in our head, our inner captain's voice. There are several character voices I use in my head, and they all serve a purpose. The first is Mrs. Whiplash, and she's my no-nonsense character. Her voice tone is firm, and I use her when I'm being victim-like. She will say, "Get on with it, enough, stop moaning." My inner whinging time tends to be first thing in the morning when I'm cleaning my teeth. I sometimes slip into giving myself a negative pep talk. So helpful, not. Knowing when your inner moaning time generates more information for your bridge, which your captain can take advantage of. Mrs. Cheerleader, her voice tone is positive and compassionate. For example, before I deliver a speech I'm less familiar with, she'll say things like, "Come on, you can do this, you're well rehearsed, you're good at what you do, you've got this." Then there's Yoda. The way he speaks makes me laugh because my husband does a mean Yoda impression. My inner Yoda helps me to see the funny side of work life, to make light of my mistakes and my foibles. Now, this is okay because I have good self-esteem now, and I embrace my treasure trove, which is basically my skills, my abilities, my achievements, as opposed to having lots of imposter syndrome thoughts and denying what I'm good at. And this enables me to feel secure enough to take the mickey out of myself. He sounds something like, "Letting go of this thought, now am I." I also use Peter Kay's voice as well. Seriously, we take ourselves too seriously, don't we? If we can have a little laugh and a joke with ourselves and, take the mickey instead of taking ourselves so seriously, it changes the meaning of the thought that we've got going on in our head. Those characters work for me. You need to get your own set of characters. When I run this course with groups of people, they've come up with all sorts of examples, including Rocky, Peter Kay, Margaret Thatcher, and Beyonce. Sometimes it's a teacher or a relative who inspired or believed in them growing up. Now, the rule is that you must have at least one compassionate character in your armoury because the inner dialogue tends to be very critical, hence the term inner critic. And then we've got a series of actions. Heading: learn to take the pee, Bob. I can be self-deprecating at times. So, for example, I've just had to look up to make sure that I've pronounced self-deprecating correctly. All of a sudden, I thought it meant something else. That's just what I'm like. I'm a bit funny when it comes to reading stuff out. But I'm okay with that. I can take the pee out myself. Right, let's carry on. So I share with you what's in my head so that you realise that you're normal. We are all fallible, quirky. We all have thoughts about ourselves. The small print is that I can only do this now because I like myself. I appreciate my Miss Stiff Knickers within. I fit somewhere along with all the other stiff-wearing knickers and pants brigade. I think it's hilarious that I'm a biff. I am a proper biff. I don't have a cool bone in my body, but that's okay because this is who I am. I have to accept myself. In my experience, the more we try to cover up who we really are, the more transparent we become. People see through our mask. We've only got one body and mind. Why not embrace it? Embrace the lumps, the bumps, the imperfections, the intellectual weaknesses. So flipping what? Other people can think what they like. It's what you think about yourself that matters. If you skimped on chapter 4, which was about embracing your gifts, talents, achievements, and getting comfortable with your weaknesses, go back, do that work. It's worth it. You're worth it, like the advert. You're worth it. Blimey, my business is called Be because I believe in people absolutely being themselves. And then we've got a series of actions. Heading: reverse gratitude. One of the things I've noticed with human beings, particularly us Brits, is that we can engage in reverse gratitude, i.e. peering over the fence at the Joneses' lawn to check out how green it is and making ourselves miserable in the process. Social media makes this even easier. Take, for example, on a trip to Galicia, Spain to attend my sister's wedding, I found myself blown away by the beauty of the area she was living in. I would describe it as a Spanish Cornwall with a hint of the Lake District. These are two of my favourite places in the UK. Throw into the mix the fact that my sister has so quickly integrated in such a welcoming, community and renovating a beautiful house, which is surrounded by eucalyptus trees and rolling hills, it's like a piece of heaven. On the day before the wedding, when I arrived at my sister's house, it was buzzing with the friends from all over the world. They were mucking in to prepare the house and the banquet. Quiches were being prepared and they realised they needed eggs. At home, I would pop 4 minutes down the road in my car to M&S. Galician life is so different. When you want eggs, you get them from your neighbours. My sister puts my niece on her shoulders, the dog is in tow too, happily wandering down the tree-clad, traffic-free road. It takes us a good 45 minutes to make the short trip down the lane because the old mamas in the blue-checked pinafores come out of the houses to kiss, chat and hug. They do it in an unhurried way and as though they have all the time in the world. When we get back, another neighbour has been around to deliver a huge basket of homegrown vegetables. Are you jealous yet? It was like the good life. Jealousy isn't a frequent emotion I experience. I think it's because there is nothing that floats my boat more than seeing people happy and doing well for themselves. It makes me happy too. Also, I believe that if you want something badly enough, you can go out and you can flipping well make it happen, folks. I'm by no means perfect. I did do a property search the next day and I overheard my mum saying, Estelle and I are looking at property here. Hee hee, I got carried away in a fantasy for a few days. Heading, re-dipping. I came away from Spain with my body and mind filled with love. Do you know what I mean by that? How does it work for you? For me, it's almost a suspension of judgment, ego, and an unconditional positive regard for human beings. I have my rose-tinted glasses on. Everything and everyone is amazing and lovely, as though there are halos and sunshine everywhere. We have a saying in our family which is, ooh, I'm going to live off that memory for days. That was my nana's phrase. Sadly, she's no longer with us, but she would always say that whenever she had a good time. My sister's wedding weekend was one of those memories. I've been re-dipping into it all week. Have you ever noticed that when we do the reverse of that too, we re-dip into memories that make us feel like crap? We replay horror movies, or worse still, we direct and construct horror movies about events that haven't even occurred yet. And, what impact does that have? You're normal. We all do it. Right, I'm going to skip over the actions. Next heading, gratitude and mindfully singing. There is plenty in social media about the benefits of gratitude and sometimes an almost passive-aggressive push and a guilt trip if you're not grateful for your lot. However, studies show that it does do you good. Emmons and McClure from the Department of Psychology, University of California, found that those that counted the blessings as opposed to the burdens evidenced higher well-being. When I returned from my weekend away in Spain, I was absolutely shattered. Classic introvert, I can only do so much socialising. Towards the end of the weekend, my sister caught me hiding in a cosy kitchen by the log burner with a cup of tea, sat in my nana's old chair. On my first day back at work, the weather in the UK was appalling, cold, dull and wet. We'd transitioned into autumn way too quickly. It was such a contrast to the glorious sunshine we'd experienced a few days ago on the promenade overlooking the twinkling turquoise sea with its bobbing fishing boats. I was tired. It was miserable. I was feeling blue because I was missing my sister and I was supposed to be writing this book. As I've been writing, I've learnt that whatever I'm feeling comes out in my fingertips and it's translated into words on a page. I needed another break. I gave myself the day off. I spent the day doing some of the things I love about my life. I got a new car and still couldn't drive it properly. I'd spent the previous week kangarooing through the village or screeching out of junctions like I was in the Dukes of Hazzard car chase. I'd had to steer clear of the dynamic knob as it caused me, I'm blaming the knob, to clip the curb. I decided to go for a drive, which always gives me a great sense of freedom. I put on some tunes, turned up the volume, wound down the window, wound down. I'm doing the wind down signal, or international sign for winding down the window if you're not watching on YouTube. I braved the dynamic knob and I let rip through the twisting country roads. I drove to one of my favourite spots in the world, Staunton Herald. It's a converted stable yard with lots of artesian shops. I browsed, I had coffee, I stood in the garden centre shed, absorbed the sweet, damp compost aroma. I listened to the rain on the tin roof. I then popped to M&S and got myself a prepared sandwich, smoothie and a yoghurt pot. I can be shallow. I like luxury. Cars have been my weakness since my black Ford Fiesta XR2. I love nature. That's my bliss. We're back to chapter 4 and what's important to you. I grounded myself by re-seeing my life as if I was seeing it for the first time. I do the same with my daughter and my husband. I study their faces. I look into their eyes. I observe them from a distance when they're not looking. I admire them. I'm going to skip over the next set of actions. So my husband and I are sat in the consultant's office. This time, my dedicated cancer support nurse is with us. The heat has been turned up. It felt serious. He uttered his diagnosis in what seemed like slow motion. He used the C word. I heard my husband's sharp intake of breath as he tensed behind me. I had the less common, crappy kind of cancer, melanoma. Melanomas are more likely to metastasize from the skin to other organs than basal or squamous. I think it's squamous cell skin cancers. I'm not going to look up how to pronounce that word. Squamous cell skin cancers. And if they do, are more difficult to treat. Thoughts of a dear friend who lost a battle to skin cancer filled my mind. I managed to hold it together until we were taken off to another room by a nurse to help process our feelings about it. I cried again. Then she said the most wonderful thing. I have a ladder of worry which helps me explain how concerned I am about you right now. You are currently on the lowest rung of my worry ladder. My inner captain reminded me of this whenever I had a wobble throughout the treatment. After our appointment, we wandered aimlessly around the hospital like we'd both lost all sense of direction. At that moment, I saw so many sick people, far sicker than me. Playing on the TV screens was the news about the recent hurricane. People had lost their lives, loved ones, and homes. I realised how lucky I was. I felt grateful. 2 operations and 12 months later, I was given the all clear. What that experience taught me is that we humans have an amazing capacity to cope, to be resilient when the crap hits the fan, to be grateful. Heading: The Inner Brilliance Outer Shine Journal. Processing thoughts. There's a difference between ruminating and processing. Ruminating is going over either an event which happened in the past or hasn't even happened yet. It's the broken record that plays in our head. Processing effectively enables you to deal with an event so that it can be put to bed. And also you can get to bed and sleep. You can come to terms with what happened and you can move on from it, because what is the use of dragging up issues that occurred 30 years ago or even 30 days ago? How does it serve us? Is it useful or useless? Preserve any learning and then let go of the emotion. Ruminating steals the moment we have right now. Constantly moaning, going on about a problem, either in your head or discussing it with another person, and not actively trying to solve it, is going to hinder you. We burden ourselves, we burden other people with the same old woes. Of course, you're allowed to complain. That can help you to process. However, if you keep telling the same old story, you're only hurting yourself and your pained listeners, and we're back to Groundhog Day. As you already know, past stubborn stuff can require a technique such as havening or EFT, which is coming up in the next chapter. With other issues, simply deciding to take action to resolve the problem is all it needs. Being the captain, feeling empowered, taking charge. I use journaling to process my thoughts and feelings, as do my clients in between coaching sessions. I have a good old rant if I need to. This is when my husband is grateful of my journaling. I don't dump copious amounts of poison in his ear and upset him in the process too. You're allowed to curse if you like. It's your journal. Better out than in your journal, is one of my mottos. And the great news is that studies show it's good for you. In a 2005 study, writing about traumatic, stressful or emotional events for 15 to 20 minutes on 3 to 5 occasions resulted in improvements in both physical and psychological health. In another study, journaling helped the body to heal physical wounds quicker. I share a template with my clients when they start journaling. This is to help embed their inner captain, but also to ensure they sufficiently process events as far as they can. It also slowly weans them off needing coaching. Once their inner captain is fully developed, they might only require a coaching session now and then. Below is a list of prompts which you can use to structure your journaling. Following this list also brings together quite a few topics covered in this book too. So instead of reading out all those prompts, because again, I'm assuming that you're not sat here with a pen, the simplest thing is to head over to my website. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you can scan that QR code there. Or if you're listening, if you head over to estellereed.com, you can download my free journaling process as my gift to you, and it'll take you through all those prompts in that document. Next heading, affirming instructions. I used to think that affirmations were new age, Pollyanna-ish nonsense. However, in the book Rich Habits, the author, Thomas C. Corley, illustrates some of the most effective daily success habits of wealthy individuals, which included using positive affirmations. Also in a study where patients were taught to turn negative thoughts or worries into affirmations, they regained confidence and self-control. This encouraged me to give them a go, and I was surprised by the great things that occurred in my work life as a result of them. So, for example, like one of my affirmations was for this book to become a bestseller. Now, here's some spooky shit for you. So, we were going to see my sister again, and my daughter said to me, "Hey, why don't we do some manifesting, Mum?" And I was like, right, okay. And she put she took a copy of my book to the airport. And, they have all the books on the shelves in order of, popularity. And she put my book on the #1 best-selling slot. And then I took a picture of her pointing at the book like that. Anyway, we didn't think anything of it. And for months, I'd been saying, my book has become a #1 bestseller. And my book, at that point, it had been published for about 6 months. So typically, if your book's going to become a bestseller, it's at the start of when it's published. And anyway, I didn't give it a further thought. And then probably about, I think it was 21 days later, I was at the point where every day I would check on Amazon whether it was going up the charts, down the charts, and it had the coveted orange sticker which said #1 bestseller. I couldn't believe it. I was absolutely flabbergasted because I'd not been doing anything differently. So in other words, I'd not had a social media campaign to promote the book. It had just jumped up the charts. So be careful what you affirm. And be careful what you wish for, folks, because you never know what good luck might come your way. So this is how you can put affirmations together. So you can use affirmations to reaffirm aspirations, your vision or your goals. So, for example, I'm working towards living in our dream home or location. That was another one of mine. Guess where we live? Dream home, dream location in Cumbria. I have a thriving internet business. That was another one of mine. Guess what? It's hilarious. I've got 2 coaching chairs behind me. When I bought some new furniture for this office when we relocated to Cumbria, they've not been used once. I run an internet business now. It's hilarious, isn't it? Again, be careful what you wish for. What else? So you can also use affirmations to diminish bad habits, fears, concerns, or worries by replacing them with empowering statements such as, I have too many things to do, would become, I'm taking charge of my responsibilities and prioritizing them accordingly. Can you hear as well, just then, I used quite a firm voice. So this is your inner captain in action, and it's me using my Mrs. Whitlash voice. Taking charge, doing it in a firm way. Yes. Using affirmations was one of the things that contributed to me writing this book. Every morning, the year before I wrote this book, I would read, I'm working towards being a published author. It kicked me up the rear and forced me to think about it each day. I tend to read my affirmations as part of my self-care regime after I've done my journaling in the morning. They're written on a note on my phone, and I've used it for all sorts of habit change, ranging from diet, exercise, health, family, state of mind, personal development, fee income, targets, money, business development, future vision or goals. It takes 2 minutes to read each day. Can you spare 2 minutes of Project Me time? So, summary of key points for this chapter. Your thinking is influencing your biology and the results you're getting in work life. You are the custodian of your beliefs now, regardless of whether someone in your past caused them. Don't be a victim, take charge and activate your inner captain. Remember that we can switch on the equivalent of Blackpool Illuminations in our head. Catch the first light bulb and use one of the techniques: distraction, tell the thought to stop, EFT, which is in the next chapter, or havening to get rid of the root cause. When you find yourself what-ifing to disarm the thought and reduce rumination, work out how you would cope if the worst thing did happen. What would your plan B be? To develop your bridge, your self-awareness, the extra 4% that most of the population don't use, notice whether what you are thinking is useful or a useless thought. If it's hindering, use one of the Blackpool Illumination strategies mentioned above. We all have off days, bad moods come and go. Be safe in the knowledge that states rise and fall all the time. We don't laugh at jokes forever, do we? Therefore, don't automatically assume you're depressed. If you apply the strategies in this book, you're more likely to avoid depression altogether, except for when your body and mind need it. For example, when you're grieving or you're experiencing loss. Re-see your life. Avoid redipping the bad bits. Recognize what's great and it'll do you good. Use the Inner Brilliance Outer Shine journal, which you can download on my website, estellereid.com, to embed your inner captain thoughts and to offload and process negative emotions. Keep yourself on track to destination joy through your affirmations. And then finally, don't let negative thoughts about yesterday or tomorrow steal the presence of today. So, as I said earlier, if you think, I can't be faffed with all of this, and you want me to do the heavy lifting for you, come and join my Shine one-to-one coaching program. Details are on that QR code there if you're watching, or if you head over to estellereid.com, you can find details of both the resources that support this book, so the free workbook that fills in all the gaps, all the actions. You've also got the free journal, and you can find details of my one-to-one Shine coaching program. So what's coming up next? Chapter 9, Antidote number 9, Learn to Handle Rough Seas. So in this chapter, I'm going to be explaining how you handle negative emotions. So thanks again for listening, and tune in again next week. If you'd like to be notified when the next episode drops, remember to subscribe. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with someone who might benefit. Finally, if any of these topics have sparked your interest and you'd like to work with me, you can apply for a free discovery call at estellereid.com. Let's see if we're a good fit. You'll also find plenty of free resources there. I'm Estelle Reid, executive coach, speaker, and best-selling author, and this has been the Optimizing Your Brilliance podcast. Thanks for listening. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered professional advice. Please consult with a qualified professional for any specific advice related to your situation.